Welcome back to C2E2, everyone. How are we doing?
Woo!
My name is Caitlin Bush. I'm the Associate Features Editor at SYFY WIRE, which is your best location for all news, features, interviews, podcasts, videos of genre, science fiction, fantasy, comics. We love it all, just as much as you do. So you can follow along with us on Twitter, hashtag C2E2, hashtag It's a Fan Thing, and you can tweet about our guest here today. I am joined by the fantastic Gene Ha, who...
Morning, everybody.
You may know this gentleman. He has won 4 Eisner Awards, which is absolutely fantastic. Right now you are working on a self-owned comic called May.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
May is a story of well, I want to do something where I'm both writing and drawing it, because as much as I admire my professional writer friends in comics who are able to handle doing giant crossovers in the middle of their intimate storyline about a family of superheroes and then suddenly having to fight like every other superhero in the Marvel or DC universe, I couldn't handle that kind of juggling 15 items while 5 editors are throwing extra items into my juggling. And I just wanted to tell my story my way. And it's a modern fantasy portal fiction, which is, portal fiction is a story like The Wizard of Oz or John Carter, where somebody from our world gets transported to another one. In this case, it's the younger sister, May, M-A-E, who has her older sister return after 8 years being missing, and she's been on another world, and she's gotten sick of that world, but unfortunately the troubles of that world have followed her back, and therefore May has to go to that new other world full of monsters and mad scientists to help fix her older sister's problems. And also her dad disappeared too once the monsters showed up, so she's hoping he's not been eaten yet.
That is you've got a lot going on there, but we also right now are doing a live draw.
Oh yeah.
So while we're talking and chatting about May, about your other work, you are going to be drawing something for us, and I think you had said that you wanted to turn it to the crowd to see if there's anything in particular they want you to draw.
Yeah, we're gonna see who's the most enthusiastic geek out there to throw a suggestion at me of what I should be drawing.
He said anything, so challenge him.
Yeah. If I have to Google image it, that's okay. I may not be as big and good of a geek as you are, but I will do my best. Oh, do you hear? You be the judge. Pick.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you hear one?
Let's see. Say it again, louder.
Oh, a dragon.
Dragon?
Oh, I can do a dragon.
A dragon.
Okay. I like doing a lot of talks at libraries for kids, where I do a panel called How to Draw Anything. And one of the frequent questions is actually, how do you draw a dragon? So I'm just going to give some really quick principles. If you know how to draw if you know how to draw a dog or other animals like that from the real world, that's the basic tricks you need to know how to draw a dragon. And I'm going to show some structure here. My quick tip for kids and for adults on how to draw a dog: draw one box, draw another box, tilt this box, and that's the basic structure you need for a dog, a wolf, anything like that. If you want to make it a cuter dog, like a Chihuahua, just make that box in front smaller. Now, because most artists have studied how to draw things in the real world as opposed to, I don't know, taking psychedelic drugs and trying to imagine the dragons and coming up with weird alien anatomies, they're usually based on creatures we know. So most are either based on things like dogs, horses, things like that. And then you start adding the giant fangs, scales, and stuff like that. And that's a basic trick for how you draw a dragon. Is if you understand how to draw something that's not a dragon from real life, and then just add scales to it, you pretty much got it. So let's do a slightly more elaborate dragon. I'm going to base this one on a horse. This is going to represent my pencil lines I would normally use. Oh, and feel free to ask me questions and other stuff, too.
Oh, I got questions for you.
Oh, go ahead.
So you mentioned that you give talks at libraries, that you talk with children. I've read that you do quite a bit of work promoting children's reading programs and the importance of comics within that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Around the year 2003, I began getting a little bit afraid of like the American comic industry wasn't trying to bring in new readers. They were essentially, and if you're a comics collector, you've seen this happen to yourselves. They've been trying to get more money from the same readers, and then just trying to convince you to buy, oh, hey, there's a crossover with 15 issues that crossovers with your, this month, that crosses over the 3 books you read this month. Why don't you buy 18 books this month? And I didn't want to necessarily that be the way that the only way the comic industry grows. So that's why I wanted to do a book that was kid-friendly and help bring in new readers. And also, I just believe and love comics, and I just think I wanted to be a healthy, growing industry for the rest of my life, so I don't have to go into animation as my retirement job. So that's one of the reasons I did that. And also, I just had kind of a burning passion to tell the kind of stories that inspired me when I was the age of a young reader. And there weren't enough comics coming out that were like that. I'm going to say that's not as much of an issue now, because a little bit after I had that drive to do a kid-friendly book, a woman named Raina Telgemeier then came out with a book called Smile, which suddenly made middle grade, like late grade school and middle school age graphic novels the biggest segment inside of graphic novels right now. In a year when Raina Telgemeier comes out with a new graphic novel, about 10% of all graphic novels sold inside of bookstores in the United States are books she authored. So she's made a huge difference to how comics are read in the United States, and a lot of those young readers then go on to superhero books too, or anything else, or hopefully also modern fantasy portal fiction books that I draw. So yeah, I can keep on adding scales to this all day, but oh, also, who was the person who yelled dragon loudest or first? Okay, come by later and I will give this drawing to you. Unless there's like some weird assignment system for this.
Well, I know
you have to keep it for archive?
Well, we are actually, part of this is a really cool story. We're auctioning these off.
Oh, I can't give that to you, but come by my table later and I'll do a smaller drawing of a dragon for you. Okay.
You'll get it no matter what. So we actually are auctioning all of the live drawings that we're doing on stage today, and we have a really cool poster board that's not up here right now, but it's back there. And during EC3, which was last weekend, and all throughout today, people have been drawing things, comics artists. I think Gwendolyn Christie came by during EC3, and she drew a Brienne of Tarth sword, which is really cool.
Ooh, nice.
So we have this kind of really cool, huge collage backstage, and we're going to be auctioning that off for St. Jude's.
Yeah, so I'm hoping you'll both get that free drawing from me, and also you'll go to the auction and pay an obscene amount of money for this.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about May, which is fantastic. When you first imagined it, how much more has it developed since you first imagined it? Has it changed from what you first envisioned?
I'll say when I first started playing with the characters that became May, around probably 93. And it's like a lot of things inside of comics or anywhere else in pop culture, it kind of started off as fan fiction of a book by Kyle Baker, Why I Hate Saturn, which was about, and he's another geek guy writing a story about two sisters, even though the fact that neither of us are women. And I was just like, I don't have any sisters, so I was just fascinated by the political dynamics of how these two sisters kind of like fought with each other and insulted each other and made fun of each other. And it was just like, wow, but it didn't have that simple thing of like growing up with brothers of, we'll keep on fighting until one of us admits we're on top. And no, they just had to keep on being, it was just so much more snark between sisters and brothers. So anyway, it was a fun, great book. And it also had one of the sisters who claimed she was from Saturn, which is why the book's called Why I Hate Saturn, because it's like, I hate Saturn because that's where my sister says she's been all this time. So May, in my head, kind of started off as this kind of musing of, oh, I love these characters. I want to do kind of I didn't call it this back then, my fan fiction version of it, and just playing with it. And then at one point, I just did a costume that was not a space fantasy costume on one of the my variations on the characters. And I realized, oh, this is not a space opera anymore. And that's how it then became a modern fantasy story with mad scientists. So it's a mashup. The best stories, at least serial stories, when you create them, if you want to keep on doing them forever, tend to be mashups of all the things you want to put together and keep on writing about and drawing forever. So that's what May is for me.
That's excellent. Well, and you mentioned that it's a story about two young women, and
Yeah.
you didn't grow up with girls. Who are some of the women in your life who you maybe have based these characters off of?
My stepsister is a huge geek. So she's much younger she's 16 years younger than me. And the characters of May and her older sister Abby are both were pretty close to the age she was when I began starting the book. And also just a lot of I know a huge amount of people who are women who work in comic shops, women who shop at comic shops, who are fans of different superhero books I've done. And I just kind of there's this thing I noticed where, like, especially when I started drawing May and writing May, say around 2012, and just figuring out how it's going to I finally like locked down the story I was going to tell. There were not a lot of good stories about geek girls who are the hero of their stories because they're geeks. And the trope that I really, really hate, that was just driving me crazy when I was trying to do research on this and see how other people had handled female geek heroes, was the geek girl who has the cute boy come up to her, take her glasses off and say, "Oh my God, you're beautiful."
And they straighten her hair and put some makeup on.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You don't have to be a geek anymore. And then the girl, this is the part that especially drives me crazy, the girl then going, "Oh, thank God I don't have to be a geek anymore." And then she drops all of her geek stuff for the rest of the story, and it's kind of like, that's horrible. That's a horrible story. That drives me crazy. And I wanted to do a character, May, who's a hero because she's a geek and because she likes computers and she likes sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that. And it's when she gets thrown into a sci-fi fantasy world, she knows how to handle it because she's read the stories of it. And her sister has actually spent more time in this world already, but she doesn't know how to be creative inside this world as well because she just takes it all for granted and didn't get into the fiction as much. She never had a chance to really play with the ideas as opposed to just living them.
And I know that May is a creator-owned comic.
Yeah.
What do you think being in creative control of your own comic has added to it? What were you afraid that would be taken away if it weren't yours?
Oh man, it's just you don't get to editors always if you're lucky, an editor will understand your story and know how it needs to build. But if you're on so many books I've worked on, either the editor I was working with or more often the editor above him, or even worse, the corporate executive above that man or woman.
The big stack of all of the,
Yeah. One of them had an objection and said, "Oh, we need a big event or we need something such and such to happen. And yeah, you need to totally change the direction of this book now." And I have had such great support from Lionforge, and they have such a great understanding of where I want to go with the story. And it's not that they don't ask for changes. They ask for changes because sometimes they understand an aspect of my story better than I do. And they say, "We know what you're trying to do, but this is actually subverting it. Why don't you do this and it'll work better?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, you're right." Yeah, Andrea Colvin and Grace Born, I always get her last name wrong because I always switch it from Bornhoff to Hoffborn. Anyway. But anyway, they're both amazing people at Lionforge.
And I know that you have had some other writers come in, because you are both writing and working on the art for this book.
Yeah, and I guess
you've had other writers come in.
Yeah, and I spent so much time inside of just freelance superhero books, which are almost always team books, that I enjoy working with other people. And also I have a background inside of the two great improv theater art forms of the United States, which one, of course, is improv theater. I did that in high school. And the other one is tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, which is all about collaborative creativity. And I love just sitting around with a bunch of geeks and trading ideas. So Mark Waid wrote one recent issue of May, and the other one was one of the geek girlfriends who helped inspire May, Molly Jane Kramer, who wrote a whole issue, and I gave her technical advice on how to structure her story as a comic book story. But it's her talking about her experiences as a young woman at Purdue University, or at a university in Indiana. And there's no way I could have brought that authenticity to the story without, actually the reason she got the assignment from me, I was saying, "Can you please write the story?" is I was asking her a bunch of questions about her time in university. And it's essentially at some point I realized, oh, she's giving me so much information, has so many strong story ideas. Why am I actually pretending that I'm writing the story anymore? Officially, why don't you just write the story you're telling to me at this point? Yeah. So.
Now, have they, you say that they had a story that they wanted to tell. Have they influenced the way that you look at the story itself, the way that you see the direction going?
Oh, yeah. The thing is, I mean, I'm from a Marvel and DC. I spent most of my career inside of Marvel and DC, telling superhero stories. So I like big slam bang action, things blowing up, spaceships falling out of the sky type stories. And if you've read the latest issue that's been out of May, a lot of that happens. But there's also the kind of the slow buildup I wanted to do of just, well, here's something part of the way I understand story, which is you want to set up things and build a suspense of just the reader thinking, what's going to happen next, and is the writer really going to do that? And either doing the thing where the reader's thinking, no, they wouldn't dare do that, or do something even weirder and bigger. And I've just been this constant slow buildup of things getting bigger and crazier. And a lot of editors are afraid where they just want the big thing to happen all the big stuff to happen in the first issue, but then it's just a repeat of the same thing every issue of, oh, which supervillain am I going to have to punch today to solve today's problem? And I'm going to say that's actually gotten a lot better in the last few years because we've had such a flood of amazing writing talent. But if the editor's worried about the reader's attention span and stuff like that, they're not going to give the writers the space to do that.
And I know that looking at all of your work that you've done for Marvel, for DC, for your own work, your style changes depending on the needs of the book.
Oh, yeah, there's I've always tried, I haven't always succeeded perfectly, but I've always tried to be a writer, a writer's artist, and trying to fairly figure out what they want from the story and then just overdo it. Just provide more than they could have hoped, hopefully. The other thing is then also, I've been in the industry I've been drawing since 1992, and I've been fighting against technology where, I don't know how a lot of you guys started reading comics in the 1990s. Okay, yeah, you guys are young. A few of you guys are old. But it was the dark ages of comic book coloring, where we'd just gotten all these amazing computer tools like Photoshop for the first time to color comic books instead of literally cutting sheets of plastic in the shape that the color needed to be when it printed with an X-Acto. But that first generation included a few brilliant colorists and then a lot of people who knew how to use the software but didn't know how to do art yet. So I began trying to do lots more rendering and careful rendering so I could fight against bad coloring being put on top of it. And then I began getting more control over the inking and then and it's just this constant thing where if I'd started now, I'd probably would have just gone for a very simple style initially. But I just kept on developing more and more tools to like take more and more control. And now there's so many, now the colors have gotten better. Go ahead. What's that? Oh, May, yeah. So hold on a second. I guess I got one sheet of paper, so I'm going to draw May here. So yeah. Oh, and yeah, feel free to go ask me more questions while I'm doing this.
Excellent. So how long did it take for you to be able to feel comfortable doing all of these different styles? Because so often an artist has a very distinctive style, but as you said, you change it up. How did you have a distinctive style at first that you had to get away from and learn from?
A little. Part of the trick with my style is that I came up through the earliest image period, where everything was over crosshatch. The famous, no matter where the lighting's coming from, you're going to draw horizontal lines on the forehead. So therefore I did a very heavily crosshatch style, but I wanted to do it in a way where it's like all of the crosshatches were meaningful. And then also, this is also the area where, like for instance, there was no digital sending of files back then. So if, everything you had to send, essentially you FedExed it. It had to physically be sent to the offices, which means every comic book artist I knew back then was really good friends with all the people who worked behind the counter at their local FedEx drop-off. Because we were such regulars. I mean, oh God, I mean, I can still remember some of these people. They are friends of mine. But yeah, you couldn't do things like sending a digital file was almost impossible. I mean, it was easier to literally mail the digital media at the time, which would be like a plastic box about this big with a spinning disk inside of it. It was essentially a hard drive. Yeah, it was the Stone Age. It was.
And.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to throw this in really quick. If you've seen Rogue One, and you remember how they stole the files from for the Death Star from that giant library tower, that's what the technology looked like in 1993. It's literally like you had to grab a box with a spinning disk in it and then get it transmitted to there, and then like the whole thing of, oh man, we've got to digitally transfer the file through an antenna. It's going to take 5 hours. That was our life back then.
And I was reading up on some interviews that you've done, and you said that the goal all along that you've achieved is to work with great writers.
Yeah.
But at this point in your life, is it to the point where these writers want to work with a great artist after the career that you've had?
Well, I'm going to say, yeah, I think we are literally in the biggest golden age of American comics right now. I mean, obviously the first one, when Superman and Wonder Woman and all those characters were created, was the most important one because it came up just with the idea of superheroes, something that had not really existed before. And then you had like Jack Kirby coming up through Will Eisner's studio, all these important events. But as far as a wealth of great stories, brilliant new ideas, expanding to every genre, I think this golden age is bigger and better than the first one. And there are so many great writers to work with now. I'm not going to run out, and they're never going to run out at this point, of great artists from all over the world. Where I had dinner last night with this brilliant Stephanie Hans, this brilliant artist from France, and it's terrifying how good she is. It is terrifying. She was describing to me about how she likes to, when she's working on a deadline, on projects, she will travel around the world and then just be like on a ferry boat and then painting on a boat, or sitting in a coffee shop, or moving to Singapore for a few months to draw comics about America. And it's just like, I want to live inside of Singapore, so I can draw America while I'm doing that. And it's kind of like, and she's painting, and it's just like, there's so much talent now. So yeah, and the other thing, of course, is like my friend Molly Jane. There are so many people who aren't writers yet, who are also brilliant. So it's such, I cannot believe, if you told me in 1992 that I would be living in a world like this, I'd be kind of like, so the world of 2019 is perfect then? And then I'd make a face and say, I can't destroy the time stream by telling you everything, but we haven't had a nuclear holocaust yet. Comics are doing great. Everything else is weird, but keep doing the comics.
But otherwise, comics are fun.
Yeah, we need the comics.
A pretty basic question, but as we're talking about all of the fantastic artists that are working today, who are some of the artists that you looked to when you were first starting out who inspired you?
I'll say like, okay, there's a lot. One of the most obvious ones is Matt Wagner and his Mage series. That was really important to me, where he's a guy who, back in the Stone Ages, he fully painted a comic book himself, airbrushed it, and if you ever seen someone airbrush a T-shirt, it's so much harder airbrushing a comic book. But he just did this epic storyline where it also changed my view of what could be done with comics, where I was so used to people in tights, superheroes being people in tights, and he did this thing where he just had the superhero be a guy who found a magic baseball bat, and he's still dressed in blue jeans. You can see the influence on my fashion. Blue jeans and a T-shirt. And then he fought against monsters coming into his world that way. And it just, for a kid, especially at that time, and this is kind of commonplace now, but for a kid then, this was groundbreaking stuff, and just said, oh man, this makes my world seem magical because he lives in a world that looks like mine and where I don't see people flying through the sky all the time. And I can now imagine superheroes in my world, in my everyday world. So, and I have a paraphrase of Samuel Johnson. His way of phrasing it is like a paragraph long, but my paraphrase is, the job of art is to make the everyday magical and the magical every day. And that's what Matt Wagner's work did for me. The other thing is, the other artist. And he's still, I cannot explain how big of an influence he is on me in every way. Bill Sienkiewicz. And he is just such a wonderful, decent human being. He just inspires me to be a better person. And he's also just one of the most talented artists. And he's always pushing himself creatively to become better and more creative and to do things he's never done before. So yeah, he's a huge influence on me too. And I recently got to actually hang out with him at a convention inside the Netherlands. And he is such a genuine person, and he's so insanely brilliant. And it's kind of like when I was talking about like me trying to explain what 2019 is to 1992 me. That convention was in Utrecht, Netherlands, where the shooting was on the train. So it's kind of like, it kind of got across the point to me of like, why we need to show that there can be a better world through stories and how we can take action for it. One of the, this is getting very international, but
please.
One of the talks I gave to some kids inside of France, it was 2 classes of grade school kids and then 1 high school class of mostly immigrant refugee kids, was a panel on how to draw yourself as a superhero. Because I wanted to be able to inspire these kids to see, you're the people who are going to save the world. And I explained to them, and I'm not joking about this, you young folks are too young to remember the dark ages of American comic book coloring. I am depending on you saving the world so that when I am 70 years old, I am not fighting for dried turnips inside of a hellish desert landscape. So yeah, please save the world.
And these artists that you look to when you were, did you ever try to imitate them to figure out your art? Because I remember in English class, in high school, my English teacher said, all right, try and write like some sort of famous author. And writing like William Faulkner is ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
What artists were you looking to and trying to imitate?
Oh, there's so many. I'll say, okay, when I was young, my big goal was to draw with the humanity and sophistication of Bill Sienkiewicz. But again, like I said, he's a guy who's always pushing himself to draw better. So by the time I began even barely understanding how he drew with pen and ink, he did his famous things like the fully painted Electra Assassin, which still at this point is kind of like, yeah, I'm never going to quite do something like that in my life that's quite at that level. The ones who felt more accessible to me, Matt Wagner did a fully painted book, but it was not quite Bill Sienkiewicz level of sophisticated painting. I did a lot of copying of Walt Simonson. Oh, a lot of the stuff from like the Thor movies aren't so much based on the early Kirby designs for Thor as it is on what Walt Simonson did. And he just, at a time when American comic books were sometimes getting towards kind of over-rendered and a little bit mushy feeling, he just put a lot of graphic design, bold graphics, using sound effects as just to make a page more exciting, just giant fun sound effects. And I don't know why, but the American comic book industry has kind of abandoned sound effects as a fun visual. And look at his old work and just the way he does his current work, his Ragnarok book, and just he makes a page fun, and the sound effects are part of it, and just the whole graphic design. The whole graphic design includes the lettering for a page. You can't design a page without the lettering and make everything work, and fully understand what you're doing.
And as we watch you do this right here, obviously, typically you're not on a stage in front of a crowd drawing for people. What is your normal, when you're at home, what does your setup look like? Are you listening to music? Are you, tell us about your process.
Well, okay, so one of the things I figured out, and this is going to be, okay, so this is in total contrast to what I just said about Stephanie Hans, where she's happily, in Thailand, or not Thailand, Singapore. It's like 90 degrees out. She's on a ferry boat and it's swaying. She's painting, and that's not me. I want my environment to be perfect, and to have no physical distractions. So like, I need to not eat too much sugar in the morning. I need to be in my chair. The lighting has to be perfect. Nowadays, I also draw on an iPad because reading glass age, so the pinch and zoom makes things a lot easier. I have to draw fine details in a building. The cushions have to be right. If it's my knees can't get cold. So yeah, I am so fussy when I draw. I am, again, this is part of the reason why Stephanie Hans was just kind of like, I mean, I'm the person who's like on the beach, in a cabin, with electricity and fully stocked kitchen, and the electricity goes out and I'm like panicking, and then I see somebody like just wandering by on the beach, like super happy with a tent on their back, and that's Stephanie, and she's like, isn't this great?
You're the glamper of everyone.
Yeah, yeah, and she's like, yeah, she's the tough, ready, like, the Delta SEAL of comic books.
Is there, we've talked about, you give talks for kids and do all of these wonderful things and teach them how to draw, essentially, and be creative. Is there anything, though you've been in this industry for a significant period of time, is there anything that you're still working on, that you still are a student of?
Oh, so much. Like May is the first book where I've done a story longer than say 12 pages, and I've worked with so many great writers. I mean, like the big famous one for the most famous is Alan Moore, and like so many great ones, Mark Waid. Anyway, I'm going to embarrass myself because if I keep on trying to list them, I'll leave somebody out, and then I'll offend. Yeah, anyway, but learning how good of writers they are as they keep on expanding and playing with stuff is a never-ending quest. When Mark Waid, okay, so I just mentioned to you a little bit ago that the thing I hated inside of stories about geek girls is the moment when the boy leans in and then says, "Oh, you don't have to be a geek anymore," and she's like says, "Oh, great, I don't have to be a geek anymore." And I said, I've often said on stages, I am never going to write that scene for May. And the fun thing that Mark Waid did is he figured out a way to write that scene and still be true to the character, and it's kind of like, how did you do that? Why did you even think of doing that? That's amazing. And then he made the character geekier by the end of the story instead of less geeky. And read that issue. It's brilliant with what he does. And the way he subverts what I was doing with the character and then puts it all back, builds it all back in place again by the end of the story. And it's kind of like, I didn't know you could do that. You're brilliant, Mark Waid. So yeah, there's constantly things. And then there's also the thing of just like, oh God, I mean, like working with Molly Jane was also an issue of the reason I'm able to write characters who aren't like me is because it doesn't matter what the life experience is that you haven't had. If you can find somebody who's alive who's had that experience or something like it, talk to them. Find some research on it. I mean, if there's anything specific about you in your life, and then you've seen a movie or read a comic book or anything like that, where somebody who has no idea about that experience writes about it, it's so painful. And it's so awkward. And it's like, anyone here served in the military? And have you read, you've got to have seen like throughout your life, before and after, like people who've written stories about like what life is like in the service, and like every detail's wrong, and it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, just all of it. Just talk to people and find people who aren't like you and add their life experience to you. You're going to be a better person for it. Your story's going to be better for it. Hopefully actually let them read the result after you like talk to them and stuff like that. Or in some cases, just work with them. Because like in my case, Molly Jane had such a story to tell, and I just had to stand back and say, I'm going to teach you how to write a script because you need to write this.
And you get to meet all of these people because you do international travel, you do events like this where you have setups and people come and
some of it. A lot of it also is just like, when I started in the industry, there was not much of a public internet. I mean, it was essentially America Online and some things like that. Where you remember if you're too young to remember it, that scene inside the movies you see about the 90s where someone tries to connect a computer and he's going, yeah, that was my era, and it was annoying, and there's no one to meet back then online. But nowadays, it's just so many people you meet online have become friends of mine. And then you actually, today I met somebody who I'd never met before who's a Facebook friend of mine, and we're like really close, and it's kind of like, oh, I forgot that people don't look exactly like their profile pictures. Then you meet them, and it's fun. And they're really, really important, good friends of mine now. And these are people I really trust.
And I know that you do, as mentioned, the inspiration for the dragon is going to get a dragon later on by going by your booth later. But I know that you do free drawings for people. Have you seen a change in what people are wanting from you over time, or is it kind of the same game?
The change isn't so much what they want, it's that there are more people who want it. Okay, so literally the way I started doing free drawings for people at conventions was, it used to be that a crowded convention would be like 95% either middle-aged men or teenage boys who are fans of Jim Lee and stuff like that. And then occasionally they'd have dragged along with them either their children or a girlfriend. And at that point, and you'd see these people with like little kids or adult women with really annoyed looks on their faces. And I think, you're at a comic convention, this should be fun. You should be having a great time. And so I'd say, hey, would you like a free drawing? If I saw somebody who looked annoyed and bored like that. And at this point, I mean, trying to find a kid or an adult woman at a comic convention who looks bored is really hard. It's not gonna happen. It's equal opportunity. The odds of finding somebody bored at this convention is not going to fall into any demographic anymore, and it's probably not going to happen at all. Everyone's having fun. So it's just when I'm bored now is when I offer the free drawings. It's not when they're bored. So.
Now, we're almost out of time here, but I know that you're here in Chicago for C2E2 for...
And I'm also live in the Chicago area, so I'm just stuck here.
Exactly. So you're here.
Yeah.
Where can people find you for the rest of the con?
Oh, when I'm not on stage at something like a panel, I am at Artist Alley E10, as in Eaton. So yeah, if you imagine like my hand sticking out of here, and then my other hand sticking over here.
That is amazing. And on that note, thank you for joining us on stage today, Gene. Everyone give a round of applause for Gene.
Thanks, geeks.
And you can follow along here on the C2E2 live stage using hashtag C2E2, hashtag It's a Fan Thing. Next up, we have Inside Steve Aoki's Neon Future comic. Stick around for that.